thank you for tuning in. I just want to take this opportunity to thank some of our friends. Firstly, all-round tech PR superstars Nelson Bostock. Whether you're an established technology brand or a fast-growing fintech, you need the right team behind you, a team that understands your brand, your purpose, your goals, and can really help you define your narrative and tell your story, the story that matters. These guys tick all of those boxes and more. You can find them at nelsonbostock.com. That's Nelson Bostock with a CK on the end, .com. Highly recommended. I also want to thank Tramshed Tech. We've come down here and they've kindly allowed us to use their world-class recording studio facility down here. But they do office space, they do events. I can't recommend them enough. That's Tramshed Tech. And also a big shout out to Be Digital, who make all this possible. Be Digital enable organizations to become lean, agile, and to attract the right talent. That's bedigitaluk.com. Welcome to the Tech Leaders Podcast. I wanted to get someone on the show from a not-for-profit organization. Okay, I've interviewed people, leaders from amazing organizations, but yeah, I hadn't had anyone from a not-for-profit. So I had a bit of luck. We did a bit of research. Myself and Amy did a bit of research. Welsh Water on our doorstep. A super interesting organisation. They don't have any shareholders. The only utilities company in the UK that don't have any shareholders. They put every single penny that they make straight back into keeping bills down, looking after the water, etc, etc, etc. The CTO, what a career he's had, what an amazing journey he's been on. Rob Norris. He only joined back in May, comes from a systems integration background, had worked for startups prior to that. He ticks all the boxes. Really interesting guy, really interesting career, really interesting organisation, perfect guest. I think you'll love this one. It's Rob Norris. Rob Norris, we finally got this set up. It's been a while since we initially agreed, but obviously you've had so much going on. It sounds like a really exciting challenge you've just embarked on there. So I suppose let's just get going with this one then, Rob. I mean, if you could just give us a little bit of an overview of your career, starting from when you sort of first got into tech, IT back in the day, right through to where you are now.
Okay, right. Now I've got to think that long back, have I? Right. So yes, 32 years in IT. I sort of started off as a computer assistant, actually, for McKinsey and Company in London. Just at the outset of personal computing, so the days of the IBM AT and XT, so and the Compact Desk Pro, which was like carrying a suitcase around the place. But actually, looking after the sort of PCs, I used to get engineers coming in to fix them, and actually, when you used to talk to the engineers, the great thing that they had that I was stuck in a basement in London, in Pall Mall. And they were actually out and about, in company cars, driving all over London, fixing PCs. So it sounded great. So I actually applied to be a field service engineer. And actually, I chose the job with Philips Business Systems because they offered me a company car, whereas I could have been one of the very first employees of Computer Centre. But they were offering me a van. So the car won on the van, and actually, if the van had won, I'd probably be retired now and a multimillionaire. But
oh, really?
That's another story. But so started off as a field service engineer, fixing PCs in London, for sort of private sector organisations, banking and financing companies, as well as government, and then sort of rose through the ranks into a sort of resource controller, so allocating calls to engineers in the field. Then I moved back to Wales, so that was probably, I spent 5 years doing that, and then moved back to Wales for 2 years, and actually became a service manager looking after Wales and the West Country for digital. So looking after a team of about 32 engineers. Did that for 2 years, and then moved back to Reading with digital to become an operations manager. I actually took that role because I recognised that whilst I knew a lot about field service, I didn't know too much about finances. So becoming an operations manager, running a business, sort of very quickly taught me, how to run a P&L, how to build a pipeline of opportunities, and then how to convert the pipeline into revenue. And then I became a service center manager, looking after a big call center for digital. So roughly about 300 people, multidisciplined, storage, Microsoft skills, network skills, early doors of security. So that was kind of, my days. I was 14 years, sort of with the big IT company, and actually left because I found that I was actually starting to see customers that I was going to, looking to sell our solutions, that were actually buying from companies I'd never heard of, right? And I started to hear, about things like the internet, like application service provision, ASP. ASP, as we know it today, is cloud computing. But if we go back sort of 20 years, it was application service provision. But for me, I joined a small startup.
So which company was this, Rob? Sorry,
it was Vitestorm. So it was a company called Vitestorm, which was so we basically turned it into an internet security company.
Yeah.
Probably the second mistake of my life was so I went with Vitestorm, which we turned into an internet security company. Quite clearly, security companies go for many multiples today, but 20 years ago when we sold it, we didn't make a huge amount. But out of Vitestorm came some pretty good technology. We also did, so in the early days of application service provision, the challenge in them days was that customers didn't want to give up their IT, so they didn't want to put it into a data center. The other issue was network speeds were too slow. And also if you wanted to scale out, mainly it was Citrix that was used. If you wanted to scale out the technology to make it stable, the reality was, Citrix in the early days wouldn't scale out as well as you needed it to in an enterprise environment. Yeah. So we had some pretty clever kids that actually built some software tools called, originally it was called server-based toolkit, then became a company called AppSense Technologies. So
I know them, yeah.
Yeah, so again, AppSense, basically stabilized, Citrix enterprise environments. And Charles Sharland, who sort of brought me on board at Vitestorm, went off with AppSense and made his many millions. So again, I probably made the wrong decision, but I didn't regret it, and had a great time building a security company.
Yeah.
Called Vitestorm.
Can I just cut in by you, Rob? Because I'm just one thing I'm really curious about you. Okay, you're selling cybersecurity and internet security services in an era. I know you were there early 2000s. That must have been a bit of a tough sell because cybercrime wasn't very prevalent at that point. Was it not?
No, exactly. You're spot on, right? So your selling skills got honed very quickly. So certainly in them days it was. I think you were trying to sell a policy. The only way you could liken it to is you really buy in a policy, an insurance policy that you're probably never going to need. Okay, that's how customers viewed it. Okay?
What kind of security threats did you see around that time then? Just out of curiosity, what kind of thing was prevalent then?
So I think in them days, what was prevalent, mainly it was insider threat. Okay, so actually employees. Okay. Yeah, so nation state were just starting, but the big threat in them days was, your sort of insider threat, but nation state were just really kicking off. But it was a difficult sell. You certainly, if you look at the paper today, you see almost on a daily basis a cyber attack. Everybody gets it. I think when I was working at Vitestorm, well actually about 2 or 3 years ago, when I went back to Bryn Mawr Rugby Club. I started talking to some of the lads there who were sitting in the corner, doing their online betting, asking me questions about, Rob, this thing called cybersecurity. What can you tell us about it, right? So, when guys, sort of 40 to 50, sort of using their mobile phones to do betting, start to ask you questions about cyber, in then you kind of know it's kind of hit the headlines. So
it's become mainstream then, isn't it?
It's mainstream. But I think the issue today, though, is it's too mainstream. Okay, so I think people are now just getting used to it. It's something that everybody thinks isn't going to happen to them, until they get hit. And I think if you look at it, they're getting complacent in some respects as well, right? Organizations in terms of cyber. But so had a great time, building a startup. I then took 12 months out, midlife crisis, age 40. Actually, a good friend of mine passed away of cancer, so I took time out, run the New York Marathon under 4 hours. Raised over sort of £10,000 at that time, which was quite a bit of money. For Christie's cancer charity. And then, Mrs. Norris told me I had to go back to work. So, I joined Fujitsu. So I originally joined as the transformation director for HMRC Revenue and Customs, Fujitsu's account there. And my job really there was a change agent to bring in new technologies, drive things like VMware, virtualization, drive data center consolidation. Had a great time doing that, challenging the status quo, challenging our suppliers, and then fell into becoming the kind of the company troubleshooter. So jetting all over the UK, into difficult projects and programs. I think everybody knows that if you deliver large projects and programs, certainly complex IT projects and programs, sometimes you're going to break a few of them. Yeah. So my role was to go in when that happened and to work with the teams, understand what went wrong, to fix issues.
You were kind of like Mr. Wolf for Fujitsu UK then, were you? Yeah, Mr. Wolf of Pulp Fiction.
So when I turned up, people knew there was a problem. Right? Yeah. But I really enjoyed it, and obviously I'd get jetted into some very difficult conversations, some very irate customers, but lo and behold, by working together, we could turn it around. And I spent 9 months up in the Highlands of Scotland, turning around a big IT project and program that had gone wrong up there. Spent a lot of time in London fixing many projects and programs, but really enjoyed it. Then I thought I'll try governance, so governance and assurance. So actually, work with teams, bid teams, project teams, at the outset of a sort of a project or a bid to make sure we got the right solution. So then make sure that the right team was put in place at the outset if you won the bid to deliver it, and then sort of govern the early days of the implementation. So did that for a while, and then actually probably about 3 years. Got bored with that, enjoyed it, but fancied a new change. And then I went back into security. So after a 10-year sort of break from security, I started to look after Fujitsu's security business in the UK.
Yeah.
At that time, it wasn't really a security business. It was, great. It was security people that we'd kind of inherited from IT outsources. So I very quickly sort of built a sales team, a pre-sales team, helped to build some security collateral, and then we actually went out and sold security directly, as part of an IT outsource, but also just buying security as a standalone service. That took off. Then very quickly I was asked to look after or build out the European business. Really enjoyed that. So did that for about 5 years in total. Again, working with Japan, helping our Japanese colleagues to understand security and build out the security business in Japan, or certainly the offerings. Yeah. So really good time. And then my last 12 months before sort of when I exited Fujitsu and came to Welsh Water, I ran the Northern Europe services business, so about 6,000 people. All multidisciplines, from application delivery, cloud, as I say, security, field service engineering, data centers. Really great team, but I found myself, not enjoying it. Working at, I guess, living out of a suitcase in a hotel in London, with a family living in Reading, but also home in Wales. So I decided, it was time to come back to the homeland, and here I am.
Good stuff. Yeah. Well, look, there's an inordinate amount of things we could unpack there, Rob. Okay. You've obviously been on a bit of a journey, but what I'm keen to talk about is rewinding back to the beginning. Okay. So you're from similar area to myself, Heads of the Valleys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a very industry. The old industries were very prevalent probably when you were growing up. A My dad's a miner.
Yeah.
And you came from that world and stuff. So what did you? How did you end up in getting into IT then? Because there wasn't many people probably in your class in school who ended up going into tech. I wouldn't have thought, around that time. So how did you end up going into tech?
So again, a long story. So just a little bit about my background, and then I'll try and answer your questions. But it might help in terms of things.
Go for it.
So I was born in Cardiff. Actually, I spent the first 11 years of my life in children's care, in care homes. So I didn't have a mum and dad, unfortunately, to speak of. So I spent time, as I say, in children's homes, and then I was fortunate enough to be fostered by a family in Bryn Mawr, and sort of went to live in Bryn Mawr at the age of 12. And to be honest, I guess life could have gone one or two ways for me, right? Fortunately for me, it's gone in a great way, but there were times when I did things I wasn't proud of. But certainly when I was in school from the age of 12 to 15, I didn't really apply myself as well as I should have. And actually, at the age of 16, when I left school, I was about to leave school. 1980s, early 80s, coal mines were closing, steelworks were closing in Ebbw Vale. I sat, actually at the age of 16, I sat at Bryn Mawr Comprehensive School to pick up my exam results. It's got a running track, I remember it now. They've got a running track, and I was a pretty good runner. I was sat at the running track, and I had a great mate of mine, a guy called Rob Gravel, who's actually the commercial director for what was TRW or Lucas Girlins. He's now based in the States, but he'd gone up and he'd got his results, and they were 10 O levels, all grade A. Okay.
Wow.
I'd have just got mine, and they were sort of 5 very poor CSEs. Okay. And he actually sat me down and said, Rob, what are you going to do with your life? Steelworks are closing, coal mines are closing. What are you going to do? I'm really concerned about you. And actually, for a 16-year-old kid to say that to another 16-year-old kid, is quite a big thing. I'll always remember it. And he just said to me, why don't you get into computing? He said, I heard computing is going to be the thing of the future. All right. So I went off, spoke to the careers teacher, and I found that there was an OND course running at Ebbw Vale College, but you needed 5 GCSEs grade C or above. So actually I went back to school. I did the thing I didn't want to do. I went back to sixth form, lower sixth. Most people were doing their A levels, and I resat all of my CSEs or O levels. So I talked the school into allowing me to do O levels. I needed 5, and I walked away with 5, and that got me into computing, into the OND. It was also a part-time course at Ebbw Vale, so it allowed me to work. So money was tight. It allowed me to work in the bicycle shop in Bryn Mawr, cable cycles, and also do a paper round, sort of early mornings, and then on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. But that's kind of how I fell into it. I kind of, if it wasn't for Rob, I don't know what I'd be doing today, but it was tough, but I don't regret it, really enjoyed it, and that's kind of how I got into computing in the first place.
That's an incredible story, Rob. I mean, Rob Gravel didn't say that to you. It's amazing how you remember that conversation as well. It was clearly a milestone, not in your career, but in your life. It was clearly a milestone in your life, which took you on this path. You still in touch with this guy?
Yeah, so Rob.
He probably can't remember it, can he?
He remembers. I remind him every now and again. So he's just bought a house back in Crickhowell. I live just outside of Crickhowell. He's married to a Bryn Mawr girl as well, but spends a lot of time now in Europe. I think Lucas or TRW have now been bought by Zeppelin in Germany. So he spends a lot of time between America and Germany. He was best man at my wedding. And we've stayed in touch ever since. So I've known Rob now since I was 12. So we're talking basically 40 years, and remain great friends. And the great thing is our families are great friends as well. Both our kids have been brought up together. I owe Rob a lot.
No, that's fantastic. So let's stay on the theme of milestones then. Obviously, that was one. You got into tech. You started building a career, which we obviously just went through. What are the other sort of key milestones, do you think, in your career?
Well, I think in not just career, but in life. So when I was sort of 19, unfortunately, my foster dad died. Actually worked for Chivers in Brimau. He actually ran the quarry in Clydach. And unfortunately, the company business went bust. I think he'd worked, best part of, sort of 40 odd years for the company, but was left with next to no, redundancy or pension. Unfortunately, he died of Alzheimer's disease in the end. That kind of taught me that, you need to, from as early as you can, try to, be financially stable. So as you go through life, you get career choices. And certainly part of the reason why I sort of left, I did very well with Digital Compact. I was running their European Support Centre at a very early age, but I recognised it was a glass ceiling, and I took the gamble to go to a startup. Took the call. This time next year, Rodney, will make you a millionaire. I took the call. I took the gamble, but I took the gamble because I could see that there was huge organisations were actually going to these smaller companies. So there was something going on there that I needed to understand. But obviously the financial incentive also helped, and that was I guess one of the reasons for that was to try and make myself financially stable, having seen what my foster dad had gone through, just to try and do that and get to a point in life that I could then choose some options. So say, fortunately for me, it went right. The company we eventually sold to EDS. So if you look at what was HP Security Services in the UK, Vicestorm was the kind of company that was behind all of that. But right. So I think that was a major point in my life. Sort of 12 years in, giving up a career in a large corporate to go to a startup. That, as I say, day two. Got funding pulled, and I had to do some drastic things for the company to survive. But I guess you learn along the way, right?
Yeah, sorry, Rob. I was going to say you did that at quite a tumultuous time as well, didn't you? Was that 2001? Yeah. Yeah.
So I did it.
We were knee deep in a recession at that point, I think, when we after the 2K thing and all that.
Yeah. So the year 2K thing, I sort of went through that, with digital, and obviously. Lots of companies made a lot of money on the back of something that was going to happen that never did. I remember working in as I say, I ran the support centre. I remember working that New Year's evening night of year 2000, working in the centre, with something like 200 people, all probably being paid, treble money and 5 days off. Wondering what I was doing there, because I was just on my basic salary. Everybody else was being paid overtime. But as the guy who ran the support centre, that's one of those things you get when you're in management. But so I was working that night, and I think we took 3 calls. One of them was from a customer ringing up just to make sure that we were there if there was a problem. So they'd obviously paid a lot of money for their support that night, and wanted to ensure that we were there waiting for the call. So great night that was.
I was in a nightclub in Swansea myself that night, but
all right. Down in Wine Street somewhere, yeah.
So I mean, you obviously took a big risk then, okay, and you were essentially building a company out of a recession, essentially. I would have thought, because did you benefit from that sort of recovery after? Because that was a bit of a recession around that period. You joined it, wasn't it? I think. Yeah.
So I think it was tough. So we had a tough 5 years. Okay, but I think we were selling, as I say, security. We were selling great services. The company when I joined was losing money. When I left, we were at break even. It was tough. But it kind of made me, the great thing with startups, to say 1 minute I was there to build a services business, but the next minute you're building the marketing for the services, you're out doing the pitches with the sales team, you do everything, and you became you pick up very quickly some very good general management skills. But no, I enjoyed it, but it was tough. It could have, as I say, there was a lot of companies that sadly went under. there weren't too many that actually made a profit or got to break even and eventually got sold. So I count myself lucky that we must have done a few things right as a management team, because Vicestorm was one of those ones that actually got bought by, as I say, EDS and then HP. So we kind of survived it and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask you a question about. I'm not sure exactly how to word this, but I'll have a go anyway. So you've worked in the big SI world, okay? The Fujitsu's. You worked, compacted a big consultancy arm. I'm guessing they probably did. But how was that? Because obviously we've seen this sort of period of disaggregation, and there's a lot of smaller service providers out there now, do sort of managed services projects, and right down to sort of more sort of recruitment style businesses. But how have you seen the sort of technology professional services space develop or change since you've been involved in it? How what's different now?
I think what's different is certainly in the early days customers would look to just outsource their problem to you. Okay, so they weren't necessarily technology savvy. So what they would do is they would outsource the problem to you. And basically one of the reasons why they were outsourcing it was they weren't getting value from it, and needed you to sweat the assets and to really drive business benefit, but also take substantial bit of cost out. I think nowadays what's really changed is customers you're probably into sort of third, fourth time outsourcing nowadays. So customers are very technology savvy. They do their homework, and I think they've already before you even get on the ITT, they've already worked out what organizations they want to talk to. So they're very knowledgeable, and actually what organizations do is they now choose elements that they want to do themselves. So sort of selective sourcing is really what it's all about today. So I think the main thing for me, I think, is the client has got a lot more savvy. And also from an SI perspective, it's a lot more difficult when you're in a third, fourth time outsource to really drive cost out, especially if it's an infrastructure based contract. Okay.
Yes.
So hence you see, if you look at consultancy today, it's in the middle ground in terms of really the integration layer, the application layer, where people are really building out the skills, especially with the journey to cloud. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I agree. So I just wanted to maybe dig into that a little bit more then with your experience at Fujitsu. What did you learn from your time at Fujitsu that kind of that you think that you've taken into your role as a CTO of an institutional entity like Welsh Water, a company, organization that's been around a long time, is operating, it's national critical infrastructure. What did you learn? What was the key things you learned from working for a company like Fujitsu that you've taken into this new venture?
So I think Fujitsu obviously is a big company. The model is changing, but a lot of their business was originally government. Okay, so again, critical national infrastructure. So we used to look after, and they still do look after, things like the borders. Okay, so passport control, the systems there, all of that is critical national infrastructure. So for me, coming into Welsh Water, which is also critical national infrastructure, you clearly understand what's important, what needs to be looked after, what to prioritise. But I think going back to the question you asked me earlier, what I've always tried to do, even when I've been in a big company or a small company, so bearing in mind I did large, organisation into a startup, back to large. I've always tried to operate as a sort of a startup in a big company. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at even the roles that I did in Fujitsu, they were always teams of 200, 300, 500 people. Okay, you amalgamate them up, and it becomes a big number. But I've always tried to run it as a startup. Okay, can-do type attitude. With the teams. In terms of what we're all about and what we're doing. And kind of that mentality I've tried to take, whether it's a big company or a small company, and that's the mentality I'm trying to bring into Welsh Water, is actually we can do this ourselves. We've got the skills, we can build the skills. We don't necessarily need to SIs or other organizations we've got some pretty clever people in Wales. Not pretty. I think that's the one thing I've been very pleasantly surprised by is, there are IT skills in Wales as good as anywhere else. And I've been fortunate enough with Fujitsu to be all over the globe. Same with Digital Compact. When I look at the skill sets in Wales, we've got some very great people. Just talking to you earlier about what you're doing with your company and the opportunities that you've got, the organisations you're working with. It's really just about finding those people and then giving them the opportunity. Because unfortunately today, I still see too many people getting on the train. Not so much now with COVID, and I think COVID gives us, where it's it's really bad. I think you have to look to the positives, and the positives for me is it's now getting people to realise that there is talent in Wales that can stay in Wales, can work from home, can actually bring skills to the workforce, rather than have to get on a sort of train at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to Paddington, spend all week in London, and then come back to Wales. But so I think for me, I've really enjoyed working in a big SI, but the mentality I'm trying to bring into Welsh Water is being innovative. Try and and if you don't try, you're never going to fail. But I'm certainly, for me, if you want to really take advantage of the new technologies, you've got to at least be prepared to try them. Even in a critical national infrastructure, you have to be able to try new technologies, and sometimes an 80% fit is good enough. And again, if I look at Welsh Water, and they've done a really great job during COVID. If you look at the amount of employees we've got, I kind of work out of the linear office in Cardiff 2 or 3 days a week, and I spend time at home. They had at one point 700 employees here daily. Nelson, 500 employees. All of them, the majority of those employees now, I think there's roughly about 70 of us in Cardiff. All the others are working from home using the technology. And if I look at the program that was going to do that in terms of smarter ways of working, that was going to be a 2-year program of work to actually get that technology rolled out to allow people to do that. That was done in 2 weeks. Okay, so the level of innovation that is actually happening at Welsh Water, the technology that's been rolled out to allow people to be able to work from home, you can imagine the speed, and still being a critical national infrastructure provider. Sometimes 80% is good enough, because actually you then find that the other 20% that you thought you needed, actually it's bells and whistles. You don't necessarily need bells and whistles.
Yeah, and this is a really good segue, actually, because I wanted to ask you about this. So you've already discussed remote working, so I'm guessing that's something you're going to take forward post-pandemic, yeah? I'm assuming most organisations are going to change forever on this front, aren't they? Surely.
I think it will for most organisations. So we recently did a survey of Welsh Water employees. Only 4% have said they want to come back to the office full time. Roughly, I think it was 58% said that they wanted a mixture of both office and work from home. And I think that's the same. You just you look online, go onto LinkedIn, you talk to other companies. I think people have now worked from home long enough, unfortunately, with COVID, and it's still going to be for a little while longer, unfortunately. But they do want to come back to an office, okay, but they don't want to come back full time. And actually, what they want to do is they want to come back to the office to collaborate with their fellow employees, because they miss that collaboration. They don't necessarily want to come back to an office just to do the day job. Yeah,
absolutely.
They're comfortable doing that from home.
I've talked about this loads recently on the podcast, and I did some other stuff for BBC Radio, and I think what we're all talking about at the moment is that a lot of people are saying the office is finished and stuff like that, and that's a load of rubbish. I think the offices are here to stay. Offices are great. I just think the balance is going to change, isn't it? Like, for example, our organisation, we used to work 1 day from home and 4 days in the office. We now do the other way around, and I think a lot of that's probably going to be quite prevalent, isn't it? Mostly at home, but to get your productivity time, but you need that collaboration time, don't you? Surely.
Yeah, you need the collaboration time, and really to drive that innovation. That kind of sparks off one another. So whilst you can do it, remotely, actually, I think that's the sort of thing that's missing. That people will come back to an office and do. So yeah, I don't see the office disappearing totally, but likewise, I don't see anybody now sort of spending an hour and a half to travel to work every day. It's non-productive time. it's not needed. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. I think we'll have a bit of a reality check and realise that we look back at this old world sort of thing, and probably why on earth did we do that for so long? I think that's what's probably going to come from it. But I think obviously we talked about the remote working. What other lessons have you know, in terms of being a CTO and a leader, tech leader? You obviously learned. We've talked about the remote working, but what else have you learned, and what else will you take forward from this lockdown period?
I think, certainly for me, from the lockdown, whilst technology is great, and I'm talking to you over Teams, and that's kind of what everybody does today. You still need to talk. So a lot of people do Teams meetings. What I find is one of the major things for me is you've got to continue. You've got to keep communicating, whether that's through Teams or actually whether you just phone them up and talk to them. If you can't get to see them, then keep talking, because I think what I also see is a lot of people relying maybe too heavily on Teams to get out company messages, and I think it's being open and honest. I think the one thing, we're in an uncertain world at the moment. Okay, and I think none of us can say what the future holds. Hopefully we will get a cure and get that cure quite quickly. But for me, I think we need to be a bit more humane. Okay, certainly for me, it's actually spend more time to get to know your people. Get to really understand what makes them tick. Talk to them. Be open and honest with them. Talk to them about your fears. A bit like your family. I look at my daughter. I've got two daughters, 25 and 19. The 25-year-old in IT, actually in computer gaming. She's working from home. Mrs. going back to the office, but if I look at my younger daughter, I think she's struggling the most. Right, she doesn't have that social interaction, with her friends, and she bottles it up, right? And and the workplace is the same. So I think you've got to recognise that, give people time. It's not all about work, right? Actually, one of the reasons why I kind of left Fujitsu was I was living out of a suitcase in a hotel in London 3-4 days a week and not seeing the family. So part of me coming back to Wales is to try and get that work-life balance right. And I think for me that's the other learning coming out of it. It's not necessarily all about work. It is getting that work-life balance right, and then also just making sure that you got your health, you got the mindset right, and that you're sort of talking to your teams at all times, and working through it.
Yeah, completely agree. I think leaders, managers, owners of companies will probably come around to this mindset of just managing people on output and what they produce, productivity, as opposed to wanting them to be in a physical location so they can see them all the time. Do you know what I mean? So it's do you know what I mean? Because it's a bit of a different, it's a different mentality, isn't it? I don't care where you are. If you do your job and you deliver, then you can be based anywhere. It doesn't make much of a difference, does it?
No, exactly. Clearly, you can do that for probably 95% of roles, and I think it is all about trust, right? So I think the one thing, whether it is like the team had to do here, we're 80% ready to go with Teams and collaboration tools. Do you know what? They had to do it, right? It wasn't we'll wait, we'll get everything right, we'll tick all the boxes with the project. They had to trust that it would work, and actually they had to trust the employees that they would get problems, we'll fix them as we go through it, right? And it worked. And I think that's the other thing people will learn, you'll take from it, is actually trust your employees more. Nobody goes to work wanting to, I know it's an old adage, but I don't think anybody goes to work wanting to do a bad job. And actually, I think the more you trust employees, and certainly I've, at a very early age of, the roles that I've done, I've been trusted at a very early age to do some very, senior type roles, managed quite a lot of people. With that trust, I've really taken that to heart and given it my best, and that's what people do. So I think for me, it's all about trust people. They may not always get it right? I'm not saying I always get it right, but I'll have a go, right? And I'll do what I can. I'll do my best, and then you've got to trust me that when I don't know or I need support or help, I'll come and ask for it. Okay.
Definitely. No, absolutely. So what exciting things you got in the pipeline then, Rob? You're doing a lot. You've got a big challenge at Welsh Water. Act a bit more like put more of a startup culture mentality in the tech areas of Welsh Water. What kind of stuff are you doing right now, and what are you excited about over the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
So there's lots of great stuff going on already that I'm kind of hopefully now adding to. But some of the things that we're doing is we're deploying Apple iPads out to our field engineers in the field, okay, to allow them to actually do the job as they're going through on a day-to-day basis, okay. You might have seen I've been tweeting not tweeting, but I put onto LinkedIn the fact we just basically now started to put digital technology out there that allows you to track the engineer in terms of where they are, how far they're away from the appointment coming to your site. It's a bit like people track pizza drivers as to where it is. Just Eat, no doubt. Actually you can see where your engineer is in terms of
that's good.
So it allows them the flexibility of, well, one, knowing the appointment, what time they come in, but two, where they are. So if they do need to pop out, pick up the kids or do something, they can see that. So we're doing a lot around sort of our field force, enabling our field force with digital. We're looking at things like simple things like CCTV. So putting CCTV into our plants so that we can actually review things remotely, right? With sensors. So that if you integrate CCTV with artificial intelligence, so if something stops, so if you take sewage works as a good example, you've probably seen the big arm or the rotator that goes around in a sewage works. If that stops, actually CCTV would pick that up, or a sensor would pick that up, send a signal back to base. You don't have to send out somebody to look at that on a manual basis daily to do those visits. So we're looking at bringing in AI, specifically to look at sort of helping us find water leakage. So in terms of where we might be through dropped pressure or pressure flows of water, being able to monitor that and then work out potentially where there are leakages occurring. So there's lots of use for technology that we can bring in on a day-to-day basis that will hopefully make the lives of the our employees, Welsh Water employees, a lot easier.
Yeah, obviously we got a mutual friend, Rob Thomas, a mutual contact who does this sort of stuff. He was telling me about all the automation you've got in Welsh Water, and you do seem like a very forward-thinking organisation in terms of automation and sort of AI, like you talked about. Is that something that you have implemented then, Rob, or did you inherit quite a progressive technology culture when you went in there?
So I inherited a great team and a great culture. Obviously, I've had conversations around that stuff, but a lot of this stuff was already underway. What I'm hopefully doing is kind of speeding that up, maybe getting. I think what I bring to Welsh Water is, because I'm not from the water industry, I'm allowed to come in and ask some very stupid questions. Okay, so for example, why do we have water meters outside of people's houses that sometimes are very difficult to get to? Why can't we have a water meter in a house that basically is digitally connected, or smart meter, and actually you don't need to go and do that visit? Okay, and that's all about challenging where people have put water meters in the past. So what I'm really
conventional wisdom, aren't you?
Exactly. It's just challenging the conventional wisdom of how people have always done it. Why do they do it in that way? And then using the technology, things like automation. I think the next big thing will be robotics. That's really exciting in terms of, you start looking at some of those robots that are out there at the moment and the technology that's there. You can see very quickly how some of that can be used. Certainly in dangerous areas where we're doing certain jobs in Welsh Water. Much safer for the individual, do that remotely as well. So there's lots of things, but I have to say I've inherited a great team that were already doing a lot of great things. Hopefully I'm helping them maybe prioritize a bit better some of the things that we need to do, maybe speeding some of that up. And I guess one of the examples would be, I brought in so if you look at technology, and if you look at defence, okay. So if you look at the technology in a submarine, whether it's the paint on the outside of a submarine, or the technologies that they use there, Well, quite clearly, if you think about water and water pipes, right, you can start to look at, okay, maybe the technology that gets used in a submarine on the outside, could we use that on our water pipes? If you look at some of the technology that is used in terms of radar systems, within the military, can we use some of those radar systems, grid systems to pinpoint leakage? If you look at drones, the use of drones in the military, again, can we use some of those drones potentially in what we do, in our dams, to actually, take photographs, certainly in areas where maybe might not be able to get that easy to. So again, that's just looking at a totally different, field. So whereas maybe we would have gone and looked at other water companies, or maybe an oil company, because again, they got some great technology. Looking at that, I guess the other final example I'll give you is, if you look at the rail industry. So there's a train that goes around, Network Rail every evening. I think over a couple of days, basically we'll look at every rail track, mainline rail track in the UK. And then what they're doing is they're taking computer images of that, or CCTV images of that track. The train's going at about 70, 80 miles an hour. It's feeding all of that information back in, and then basically it's sending out a report where the guys will go out and do a manual check. So if it picks up what it thinks is an issue or a defect, a report will get sent out. So the following day, the rail inspection teams will go out and inspect that rail to make sure there's not a problem. Well, actually, there's things that we can learn in that technology. Now, if we can put that into pipes and actually start sending AI technology around the pipes and looking for cracks, so before they become big issues or defects. So just making those linkages with those other industries and other teams, there are things that we can learn from them quite quickly that can be applied to the water industry.
Is that your job then, to stay abreast of what's going on in other industries and trying to bring in new ideas from things like that, things like defence, etc., etc.? Yeah.
My job, as I say, as the sort of chief technology officer, is to stay abreast of technology. Yes. And actually, I've always done it. Even when I was at Fujitsu, I used to go spend 2 days and go and sit in the startups, in the startup hubs, and just watch, some very smart people who have left, great jobs to go and start up companies, just to understand the mentality, what they were working on, and what new technologies, what were they thinking about, what did they see as the business problems, and then what solutions were they coming up with. That's kind of my role, is to stay abreast of that. Yes. But also my role is to challenge the rest of the organization to be as inquisitive, okay? Because it's not just down to me to bring innovation into an organization. I think everybody has an opportunity. What I've got to do, and the rest of the management team at Welsh Water have got to do, is build an environment where people feel valued for bringing those ideas, and then when they make business sense, that we actually get behind them and really turn those ideas into reality. And I think with the chief exec and the management team I'm working with at Welsh Water, they want to do that, and they are already doing that. And I think part of Peter Perry bringing me into Welsh Water was to really try and speed that up, because there are great things going on in this company. We've got some great people, and we just need to give them the opportunity to really crack on.
Of course, yeah, brilliant. Well, look, moving away from Welsh Water now then, I just wanted to ask you, Rob, what technology are you excited about right now? Is it sort of AI, quantum computing? Is there anything specific that you've seen recently, or you're keeping tabs on, which you think is going to have a profound effect on society, or whatever?
So I think, certainly artificial intelligence and automation, without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, we're already starting to use and trial some of those technologies within Welsh Water, but I think we're early doors with that technology, and maybe don't necessarily appreciate how that's going to fundamentally change things. I think robotics, for me, is a big one. In terms of just seeing some of the robots that are out there at the moment, in terms of what they're capable of doing. Again, in terms of maybe taking over some of those really difficult manual jobs that are, which could, be, sort of a safety issue. Certainly, I think that is those an area to look at. Quantum, I'm kind of, starting to look at, right, in terms of where we are. But I think again, quantum, you see a lot talked about but again, it's early doors. But I think for me, and then it's, what I'm also looking at is technology that's been out there for years. Okay, so things like, as I said, CCTV. If you can connect CCTV up with artificial intelligence, that then starts to give you things that you probably haven't had before. As an example, where you've got plant machinery that's not working, sensor technology, linking sensor technology to AI. So I think there are a lot of technologies out there that actually, been around for years. It's just how you apply them, right? It's just really thinking about, have we applied them in the smartest way that we could have to fix the problem? And is that because actually we've always looked at the problem in the same way, for many years, and it's just really looking at what it is that you're trying to actually fix.
Yeah, of course, the practicality of the technology. Because I mean, you see this a lot, don't you? There's someone sort of takes a concept which has been around for years, puts a wrapper around it and a ribbon on the top and rebrands it as something else, and it's like an on-trend term then, you know what I mean? So
exactly.
But ultimately it's about solving problems, isn't it, and becoming more efficient. Rob, I wanted to ask you about just yourself then, to finish on this one. What person, book, or sort of anecdote or something have you seen recently or listened to over lockdown, or anything you sort of has been quite poignant for you and has kind of taught you a lesson or given you some good advice?
I kind of listen to podcasts rather than sort of read books. Don't necessarily have the patience. And one of the great things of being back in Wales is I'm trying to get my fitness back. So I'm doing a lot of running, and being a rugby man, I've been listening to a lot of the Scrum 5 podcasts.
Oh yeah.
And actually one of the ones I listened to was, and actually for any business leader, was the one with Pat Lam, Bristol Rugby. And actually, if you take, one of the things I got was, I kind of went running on a Saturday. I came in on the Monday morning and asked my management team to really think about that, and actually go and listen to it. And there were some things in there that really stood out for me in terms of, why Bristol, brought him in, what he's trying to do, the fact that he sees it as a 2-3 year project. And then some of the things that he talked about in terms of some of the coaching staff, looking at players, and I think one of the comments that stood out for me was, when you look at that player, don't tell me what he can't do, tell me what you think he can do, right?
Yeah.
So actually, just looking at a player in a totally different light is, I'm not interested in what he can't do. I already know that. Actually, tell me what he can do. Work with him, work with me to improve that individual. And I gave that to my management team, and I've asked them to go away and read it, because actually that's what I'm trying to do at Welsh Water. It's really changed the mindset in terms of what we can do if we all believe in ourselves, we all understand where we're going, what the strategy is all about, the part that we play in that, then actually we can pull it off.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's just end on this one then, Rob. So difficult time at the moment, okay? There's a lot of businesses who are struggling, as a leader of people yourself. What kind of advice would you give to sort of, young entrepreneurs or managers who are leading teams at the moment to try and keep spirits up and just get, engagement and productivity from their teams?
So for me, it all goes back to what I'd said earlier. I think you need to talk, keep talking to your people, understand your people. Don't just talk about work, right? Spend some time to get to know them, and actually understand what they do, what makes them tick outside of work. And actually a difficult thing is people unfortunately are losing their jobs. Okay, so if people, now is probably the time, if they do want to try to retrain or do something that they never wanted to do before, or they've always wanted to do it but never had the opportunity, maybe through adversity try that. But I think for me, it really is all about, don't be afraid, be open, be honest, with your teams. You might not always have the answers. Certainly the way I've kind of gone through my career is I've never pretended to be the answer to everything and that I know it all. Okay.
Yeah.
I've always been never been afraid to put my hand up. I've always probably been the first there to say, look, let me try it, let me have a go. And actually, occasionally I've failed, but actually, be open and honest with your people. If you don't know, then ask for help. And actually, if you're having a difficult time at the moment with COVID, ask for help. Okay.
Of course.
We're all human. Sometimes people can't spot that. So sometimes you've got to put your hand up and ask for help. and then just be there for people when they need that help. I think that's important. So look after your people. If you look after your people, again, it's an old adage, you look after your team, they'll look after you. More often than not, you'll get the right results.
No, I totally agree. I think vulnerability is quite powerful sometimes, isn't it? And I think a lot of people, they just want authenticity. They want you to just be be yourself and just provide and just sort of work on their, but just put effort into working on their behalf, sort of thing, to bring them along. I mean, I think that's great advice, Rob. So look, thanks for your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Thanks for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. I'm sure we'll speak again in the future.
Okay, all the best. Thank you.